Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome back to Tea Time, the podcast. And in today's episode, I am going to talk about how to start a podcast, tips on podcasting, and my experience with podcasting so far. So, I have two podcasts just for the record. So, it may seem as though I don't have that much podcasting content on Tea Time, the podcast, just yet, but I have been recording some episodes and I have been doing other recordings as well for my other podcasts. So, that's my little preface. So I have been getting the question, and I decided this is a great topic for an episode for Tea Time. And for those of you who are on the entrepreneurial journey and you are considering doing a podcast and basically in business as well. All right. So I'm going to start with people want to know how to get started. Well, the first thing to get started is create an account on Anchor FM. I swear by Anchor FM, it's going to make podcasting way easier than having to do it manually, having to do it through iTunes, because yes, you can just focus on one platform. Yes, you can just focus on one platform and upload to there. But the great thing about Anchor FM, it acts as a that person in between to get all the work done for you. So you just create an account and that's it. You're ready to upload your first podcast. Create an account, give it a name, a description. You set up the account and they just walk you through the process. And then you just upload your very first episode and that's it. It's so easy. So, and the great thing about Anchor, it's just that one place that you can come to host your podcast, and it does the rest of the work for you. It publishes your podcast to many different platforms. So, like my first podcast, which is called Boss Lady Podcast, that's more for my personal brand. And I got on many platforms within a couple days. Now, I would tell you that I'm not sure why this happened, but I did not get on iTunes for some reason. And it's not really that important to me to be everywhere because at the end of the day, you can listen to the podcast right there on Anchor as well. But when creating Tea Time, the podcast, this one that you're on right now and you're listening to, you might just be listening to it on iTunes. And funny enough, I was successful with getting it on iTunes within 2 days. So I'm not sure really what the reason for that, and I haven't actually looked into it, but I just want to highlight that in case you decide to start a podcast. And I know iTunes is one of the top major podcasting platforms. So I don't want anybody asking me, how come I'm not on iTunes? I can't really tell you why because I haven't figured that out yet. And mainly because it's not that important to me to find out because this podcast, which is for business, is on iTunes and that's the one that's most important to me. So that's that. So go on anchor.fm. You can do that right now while you're listening to this podcast and create an account. Now, that's all I'm asking you to do because you need to finish listening to this podcast before you proceed. And it's better to not multitask setting up something new that you're doing for the first time. But you can open up the website and just leave that tab open. And then when you're done listening to this, you can complete and proceed onto making your own podcast. And I tell you to do that like right now. So as I'm giving you an actionable step to actually get started on your podcast. All right, if that is something that you really want to do and it's a good fit for your business, then why wait? You can start working on your podcast and creating the account before you actually launch it. So you still have time to think about it. All right, so the first thing I want to say is getting over your fears. My first tip is to get over your fears. There are many common excuses that I want to address, and one of them is my voice sounds weird. that was one thing that was tapping me on the shoulder just a little bit, because I was like, will people want to listen to me? Um, because with video, there's the benefit of video where people can see you, get a better feel for who you are, but there is that lack of that benefit. So everything has its pros and cons, and that's why I started a podcast. I didn't want to be seen. I just want to be able to get my message out in the spur of the moment. I know there were many times where I'm on the go in the middle of doing something and I'm struck with a bit of inspiration, but I am nowhere in a visual, I'm not in a visual way that I can present myself. I can't present myself in a visual manner when those moments hit. And sometimes, like, yeah, you can write it down and you can come and record a video, but sometimes you want to get it and strike it while you're in that moment of passion, because it just does not come out the same way. So this podcast is going to complement all my video stuff, and I said that so that you can learn that you can do the same thing. It doesn't mean that you have to stop doing video. It doesn't mean that you have to change. Your podcast can be a complement to your other content channels. So if you don't do video and you write, a podcast can complement that, because not all the time people have time to sit down and read. That's why Audible exists, because people don't have time to sit and read a book. It has helped people tremendously to be able to sit and listen to a book, and they're not sitting and listening, they're doing other things and listening. So there you have it. So if you're a writer and you're contemplating, I already blog, why would I need to do an audio version of it, or a podcast as it's called, there's your answer. So if you're a blogger and you write, and funny enough, I was talking to a very good friend of mine, and she's a blogger, and she was like, what would I podcast about? And I told her, the direction doesn't have to change. It's the same thing, just a different format, because you want to have content that people can consume in different formats, because with time things change, things evolve, and people's habits change in the way and the manner that they consume content. All right, so that's that tip, why you should start a podcast, what fears you have around it. If you think your voice sounds weird, just forget about it, and don't focus on that. Just focus on your message. The next one is, oh, I need to buy a mic. I need equipment. I need this. I need that. No, you don't. No, you don't. Let me tell you what I started my podcast with, and no one has complained of the audio thus far. And in general, whenever I'm recording anything, I don't have audio issues, even for lives. There are many people who do video and their audio sucks. Have you gone on YouTube and you turn the volume all the way up on YouTube and on your device, and the audio is still poor? So that's not an excuse. Granted, a podcast audio is super important, because there's no podcast without audio. That's the main point of it. Listen, all you need is the headphones that come with your cell phone. If you don't have one, if it's spoiled, you can go buy yourself a new good pair of headphones for $20, $25, I don't know. But just buy yourself a good pair of cell phone headphones, plug it into your device that you're using for recording, which most likely will be your computer. However, you can record directly on your phone as well and import that to your computer. So if you're on the go, or you're waiting for someone, or you're in the park and you feel like recording a podcast, this is another reason why I was really drawn to doing podcasts. It's just the convenience of it. You can record on your phone and upload it to Anchor then and there. Anchor has an app, and that's it. So all you need is a pair of cell phone headphones, and that mic is sufficient. Like, I am recording and I'm using QuickTime, so you don't need any special software. If you're on Mac, that's already built in. If you use Zoom, you can record on Zoom. If you have a guest, you can record from Zoom. As soon as once you have recorded your session on Zoom, If you're not familiar with Zoom, go check that out. It's Zoom, ZOOM.us. Install that. It's free. You can have guests on your podcast. And once you click the record button, when you are speaking with someone on Zoom, it automatically creates a separate audio file. So you don't even need to extract anything. You really don't need much when it comes to equipment. I think if anything that you need, it's mainly the headset, because more than likely you have a computer and you have a phone already. So you probably just need a headset with the mic and you're good to go. What else in terms of equipment? Yeah, there's nothing else. So when I hear people, I'm waiting on this, you don't need to wait on that. Like, sure, you can buy the nice fancy mic because it's fancy and it's cool. It makes you feel cool. Like, there's a particular mic, I can't remember the name of the brand, but it makes you feel cool when you can have your mic and you can, just have it, and it does give you a different sound, but a sound quality, but this is really, really clear, crisp. People can hear you clearly. The audio levels are good with a regular headset mic. You really don't need anything else. All right, so the next tip I have for you is length. So if you are new to podcasting, and not just new to podcasting, but you have a new podcast, because you might be familiar with podcasting, but you started something with a totally new direction, or people don't know you very well, you haven't really built much of an audience. If you are new in any way, I would say when you start doing your podcast, try to be frequent with it. And frequent is subjective. And so when I say frequent, I would say about at least weekly, fortnightly, which is every 2 weeks, or monthly, which is not very frequent, but it's better than having big chunks of space by months with a new podcast. However, if you can't do it frequent enough, I still vote for getting started, because eventually the pressure, you're going to have personal pressure in your mind to, like, okay, I haven't put out a podcast since, I should put out something, rather than you have never put out one, or you've never launched your podcast and you just never get started. Always get started. Getting started is how you will start to build momentum. And just keep in mind to constantly put out content. The other thing would be length. I would say, again, if it's a new podcast, people are really trying to feel you out, right? They want to decide, is this something that I want to listen to? And I may probably go over this ideal length with this podcast, because I am 13 minutes in and I'm only on my third point. And I would say 22 minutes, 20 minutes on average. And I did some research, and the research brings up about 20 minutes is an ideal length for a podcast, especially if you're new. Because people do look at the length. There's nothing else to look at and decide, is this something I want to listen to? So the first thing people will look at, apart from the title and the description, is how long is it? Do I have time to listen to this right now? And if you don't know, you're not familiar with the podcast host, and you see 45 minutes, there is a lower chance that you are going to listen to it. Or you might listen to it for like 2 or 3 minutes to feel out the podcast. And then if they are taking too long for you to get a sense of, is this something I want to listen to, they're probably going to stop listening. So I have come up with the figure 10 to 22 minutes. Some of my favorite podcasts, and my favorite podcast is from Myleik. She has the My Taught You podcast. You can look her up. Just search Myleik on Google and you'll see. When I check back to like her very first couple episodes, some of her episodes were 8 minutes. Another big podcaster, I saw like 9-10 minutes. So I think some people might think, this is not worth it, this is not of any value, because I only spoke for 8 minutes. it's how you get started and how you get used to podcasting and putting out content. That's actually perfect, because while you are getting used to it, your listeners are feeling you out and getting used to you and your tone of voice and what you have to say. So it's quite fine to record for 8 minutes, 10 minutes. So a very nice figure I have set on my notes is 10 to 22 minutes is a really nice starting point for a podcast. And not just a starting point in general. Sometimes people just don't want to listen to something that is beyond 30, 35 minutes unless they really, really love you. All right, so yeah, that is that. The other thing I should have started with, now, as you can tell, these tips are in no particular order, but figure out what's your niche. What is your brand topics? Who is your niche? Because like everything else, like every business, it's just going to be the same with content. You want to think about your audience, similarly to your ideal client. So who is your ideal audience and what are they interested in? And not so much what they are interested in, but if you pick a niche, you have to ask yourself, who am I talking to? Who is listening to this? Because you have to be sure that there's an audience for the thing that you want to talk about. There's no point in talking about something and there is no audience for it. So see if there is something that you are passionate about and really see if there is, actually, let me rewind. Sometimes there is a gap in the podcasting content world, and you might be able to fill that gap, but make sure that it is something that you are passionate about. Now, if it's the opposite and there are many people putting out content in that particular area, I won't say don't bother to put out a podcast, because we all have our own unique perspective on a particular topic, and we have our own personalities. So there might be 5 people speaking on branding, but there is one person that stands out to me because they are relatable to me. So that's why I would listen to brand podcaster A over brand podcaster C, So if it's a podcasting topic that there is a lot of podcasts on it, then what you need to do is figure out, okay, how can I bring a unique voice in this already existing market? So yeah, try to find ways to be unique and bring across your personality. So in everything that you do, be yourself. I know it's cliche, but be yourself. Yes, you want to be unique, but don't try to be something that you're not. So that's just my side tip. So I think that is all. Let me just go through my notes really quickly. Yeah, I covered everything. So I hope that helped you make a decision to podcast or not. And if this was helpful to you, please let me know. Private message me on Instagram, comment on my latest post, and let me know if you listen to the Tea Time podcast that is on podcasting. And yeah, just get in touch and let me know how this podcast was for you. And also, what I'd really love is to know what you want to hear me talk about next. And I am 19 minutes in, and I think I've made a really good time because I'm within that pocket of 10 to 20, 22 minutes. So again, if you enjoy this podcast, let me know. Also, let me know what you want to hear me talk about, and also share this podcast with somebody. If you know somebody who has been considering if to podcast, then share this with them to help them decide. All right, so that is your dose of tea with Cassia, the branding queen, and I will talk to you guys again soon. Have a great day. Bye, guys.